Now, if you're living in Nigeria, you'll agree with me that the cost of living continues to climb each day, from rising food inflation to the removal of fuel subsidy to the floating of the naira. Indeed, it's becoming harder for the average Nigerian, both poor and rich, to really feed and afford the basic amenities in life. To discuss this issue of rising cost of living in Nigeria and how Nigerians are still waiting for that renewed hope, I have with me a public analyst in the person of Opeyemi Oke. Opeyemi, welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Now, I want you to cast your mind back to, say, the beginning of the year, January, February, and now cast your mind back to the previous month and the month just before them. How much have you been spending roughly? Do you feel that you're spending more in those past 2 months? You don't have to give me the exact amount, but maybe by percentage in terms of your transportation, your feeding, your accommodation, going about your day-to-day.
Of course, every Nigerian is spending more. Even the government is spending more right now. So it's been really, really tough for Nigerians, I must say. Looking from my lens and the lens of an average Nigerian out there on the street, it's been tough. The inflationary pressure, the rising cost of food, rising cost of fuel and transportation, and of course our wages, our income, our salaries are relatively the same. So
one side
really
is going up and the other
side
is
yeah, that's what we've had, in the last 2 months. But of course, if we look at, I mean, for the reasons why the government has to do what it has to do, I think that all of us, we have to, pay the price, for now. Hopefully, the government will hold on. I mean, we hold their own side of the bargain, in ensuring that I mean, I love the policy direction we are on right now, but of course, implementing these things to the letters and ensuring that it translates, to the cost of living of an average Nigerian, the masses or the poor of the poorest, is what is most important.
So you say we must pay for it now, but for how long? How long can Nigerians continue to tighten their belts? If you've done it in the month of June, you've done it in July, are we going to do that in August, September? Where is that bright light at the end of this tunnel?
I can't speak for the government, but one thing I can say is that if we look at the policy, like I said, from the policy angle, I think the Tinubu-led administration, I think they're on the right path in terms of, ensuring that fuel subsidy is removed. By privilege, I've worked in both private sector and public sector. So I think I have a bit of understanding of how, some crooks of people, like the president said during his last speech, to Nigeria, that, some elites of the, I think elite of the elites, right, who are, profiteering, at the expense of our infrastructure, at the expense of the education, at the expense of the inclusive and prosperous Nigeria that that we all
So what happens to the most vulnerable, the people who don't have maybe that emergency fund, that just cannot afford the 3 square meals a day, can't afford to pay their rent? We've heard that the government is considering an 8,000 naira palliative to at least 12 million of the poorest of the poor, but some of the opinion that isn't that some form of subsidy, and why should we be subsidizing for just that amount of people when the effect is felt by all Nigerians?
I totally agree, and I must say that, of course, I think the government has put the implementation of that, on hold for now. That's to say that the government maybe are listening to the people, because saying 12 million out of over 200 million Nigerian population, is not sustainable, is not reasonable. So can we then, instead of giving palliative of 8,000 naira to families, can we make these monies available, for small older farmers, for MSMEs, and pump it into the productive arm of the economy, So by so doing, the effect is much more, because this money is borrowed, it's borrowed. We're going to pay interest on it. So why do we have to, dole it out and give it to people 8,000 with the current inflation at over 22.79% inflation that we have right now? So you see that would not even have any any meaningful impact on the families that are going to benefit from it. But if this money, if you during the address of the president, the last address, you are hearing of 75 billion in investment into manufacturing, 125 billion into MSME and informal sector. So if we make access to financing available, distribute this money across the states, let this money get to the people that need financing to actually enhance their businesses, I believe that it will have better effect, on the economy of Nigeria, create, more jobs, and is more sustainable and inclusive.
Now, we know that investment in infrastructure takes time. So if you put in money to maybe build roads, to build hospitals, schools, it doesn't happen overnight. But in the interim, what are some short-term gains or short-term decisions, or will I say things to reduce the cost of spending? So, and I'm saying that specifically to the government. Can we look at having governance a little bit cheaper?
Yes.
Because
I
if you
agree
say
with
the
you.
government is listening, then surely Nigerians are asking, well, if the furniture is okay, why do our lawmakers need to get an
New
allowance for new
furnitures,
furniture? And we can't afford transportation, food.
I agree with you. But the truth of the matter is that reducing the cost of governance in Nigeria is not just for political office holders. I think it's high time we start looking at, nobody's talking about the civil service and the need for us to, implement the Oransaye report, to make sure that our institutions are empowered to function maximally at their best. Can we look at reforms in the public sector where, projects are not padded, projects are completed, ministries and department of government. We can see the government is merging MDAs now.
But then when we look
all
at
of that
the
happening.
ministerial list, it's quite long. One would have said if we're going to see that reduction in the cost of governance, shouldn't it start from the top and having maybe a slimmer list?
See, having reduced number of government appointments or appointees does not necessarily translate to reduction in cost of governance. But as much as that is important, reducing, the cost of,
But what does it say, the body language of having a slimmer cabinet to the rest of the government, to the state government, to the local government? Surely leadership filters from the top.
So slimmer cabinet would mean that maybe we have, a reduced number of politicians. If you look at, can be nice idea, but what I'm saying is does not
your
necessarily
answer about having mergers, ministries being merged.
Exactly. Currently, I think we have about 541 ministries, development and agencies of government. I don't know, the reduction is still ongoing, but by our Oransaye report, we are supposed to reduce to 161 MDAs. By so doing, I think we'll be able to save about 22 billion, on an annual basis on our overhead. So I believe that beyond just reducing the number of political appointments, we need to actually we need to see through and applaud the merging of these ministries and departments of government. And of course, like I said again, we need to look into, I've been pleased to work both in public sector and private sector. And, if you see the corruption that goes on in our civil service today, you will realize that, politicians are even learner. In some cases, sometimes it's these civil servants that even teach these politicians how to even, go about their, crooks and their whims and caprice to defraud, the nation. That's those that have been alleged to do so. However, I think that if we can, like I said, empower institutions to function maximally and productively, reduce, these budget padding, project padding, and ensure that projects are completed. Like I said, I've asked questions on certain projects in my area, because the moment you are implementing projects in my area, I have a culture of going online. Let me check how much was given for this project. How many kilometers of road should you do? You'll be surprised that some roads, that government awards 17 kilometers. Take for instance, by the time it gets to Ministry for Implementation, go back there, go and measure that road. That road is maybe about 16 kilometers, 15 kilometers. Some civil servants, some ogas at the top somewhere, will find a way to ensure that they reduce it by 1 kilometer, and the money is shared amongst themselves. So I said,
whose responsibility is this to keep the civil service in check? Because you're saying that you do this personally. Are you shifting this responsibility to the office of the citizen?
The office of the citizens has responsibilities. We must not say no to that. However, I believe that is why that's why we elect people to represent us at different, different arms of government. We have them in the parliament. We have them we have some of them appointed as SAs. We have, so by the time you look at the job of a legislator, House of Rep, is to perform oversight function, to ensure that projects that are zoned to your, local constituency, you follow up to ensure that it is implemented. There are projects that have been funded by previous administration that were abandoned, that now maybe they will be re-awarded to new contractors. Who is answering those questions? And by the time you ask questions around that, you will realize that it's not necessarily the politician that is even the culprit in this. You will see the hands of one civil servant there. I'm not saying that civil servants are the, are the most corrupt people in the Nigerian system, but I'm saying that, beyond reducing the number of appointees or political office holders, we need to start seeing how we, pay attention to our ministries, departments, and agencies, and ensure that they are empowered to function maximally and productively. You have ghost workers. There are people that are in civil service today. They are no longer in the country, and yet they are earning salaries. There are coppers. I mean, this corruption they were talking about.
Do you agree that the cost of governance today
is high?
Is high.
It's obvious to even the blind, and of course clear to everyone that the cost of governance in Nigeria today is high, and that is why I'm appealing to our senators. Of course, they are elected to represent the interest of the people. So we must, this is a very urgent, and the state of the economy in Nigeria it requires that, how do I put it? It requires urgent intervention. So we should not be talking about, furnitures or whatever it is that we want to do. Yes, your work environment is to be made as comfortable as possible, but can we delay this gratification, and this 75 billion can be pumped into SMEs, youth empowerment, at the grassroots level? I'm a grassroots man. I advocate for inclusive economic development, even at the local levels. You'll be surprised at what a trader can do with 50,000 naira in my hometown in Ilanrogo in Osun State. You'll be surprised. You'll be amazed at what you can do with 50,000 naira. And if that money trickles down to, and these are people that cannot afford, that cannot access loan with banks. Lenders they can't give them money. So our MSME and informal sector needs attention, and by so doing, we can drive productivity at the local level.
I'll take you back to the point you made about investing into SMEs and having those micro loans available. Now, if you look at the past administration under President Muhammadu Buhari, the NSIPs address that, whether you're talking about the trader money, market money, farmer money. But how successful were these, and how much impact did they make that these things should be considered to be carried on in terms of providing the much needed capital to these institutions?
So that brings me back to what I said again about the civil service and our ministry's government agency. By privilege, during the Buhari-led administration, I was the Director General of the Chamber of Commerce. So I was hands-on in the implementation of some of these projects. And you'd realize that as successful, as brilliant as that idea would have been, if you observe during the first term of Buhari-led administration, when the office of Vice President oversaw the implementation of that project, we recorded success. But during the second time it was taken to the ministry, what happened? What happened with it? Then we recorded crazy failure. Or permit my language, and that was by ministry. All right. When it was implemented by the office of the Vice President, we would have said, "Oh, politicians are thieves." It was successful. But during the second time, when the responsibility was shielded to the ministry, what happened? Corruption happened. Now, it would have been a successful project because truth of the matter is this money was made available. It was not audio money. I have members of my Chamber of Commerce that accessed the facility. They are paying back gradually right now. And that's a fantastic project. Be able to access 10 million naira at a single digit.
So the administration is
is just as important as the policy.
Okay.
So, and look at this. The woman that implemented that project is not answering questions now. So,
so that system of accountability, even beyond an administration's tenure. But I need to still get you back to the realities of living in Nigeria today. The average person that does not have that money saved for the rainy day, what should they be expecting? What kind of cushion can they expect in the short term while we're waiting for the economy to be stimulated? What should the government be doing to address this? Because the removal of subsidy affects both rich and poor. it affects the cost of living, it affects the cost of production. And when people are using more money to produce things, then people have less purchasing power, and then you begin to see the economy to stagnate.
Right. Of course, it has become very pertinent that in Nigeria today, you cannot sit down with one source of income and expect that you'll be fine. So this is the time for people to leverage their resourcefulness and see what you can. I mean, myself, I've had to diversify and do other things, right? As much as, yes, we expect the government to put right infrastructure in place for us to thrive, we also all ourselves a responsibility to make sure that we survive. Like the Tinubu-led administration has said, within the next 9 months, they're pumping money into the informal and formal sector, and of course, manufacturing is also, part of the 75 billion for 75, companies that will create jobs.
Are you
right?
confident that this will affect the rising cost of living, inflation? Can we expect to see these numbers come down?
The inflation, of course, it's not, like I said, the Tinubu-led administration is just about 60 days old in administration. Like I tell to my friends is that as much as we have a lot of pessimists in town, as much as we have a lot of narratives online, I think it's we are first Nigerian before we are partisan politician, whatever it is that we are. Whoever is the president of Nigeria now, our dream is for Nigeria to be better. So let's stay optimistic that the government knows what it is doing. Let's trust the policy, direction of the government. Advise when necessary. Hold government accountable. I'm an advocate of let's hold government accountable. But 60 days is too short for us to start really saying that they will fail, that they are set out to fail. Let's stay optimistic, that our country is going to be better. But of course, in our optimism, I'm also telling the government that government needs to ensure that they don't take the resilience and the resilience of Nigerians for granted. So I am appealing to our president and everyone that has been, appointed to champion one thing or the other to ensure that, we stick to the direction that can cushion the effect of this inflationary pressure that has translated into really hardship, for the people. Whilst, business owners, as much as, of course, the pressure is also mounting on them. So asking them to increase wages right now might not. I'm talking about the private sector. I see President Tinubu is saying that, of course, the wages and the living wage is going to increase. That has to be implemented at the earliest possible time. So if living wage is increased and money or access to finance is made easy for MSME and informal sector, and of course there is revolution in our agriculture and we can be more productive at the local level. So if you are producing the things that we depend on dollars, to import into the country, our demand for dollar on our highly dollarized economy becomes a bit, softened, and it becomes a win-win both for the government and for the people.
The last thing you said or earlier on was that we need to start seeing the leaders, the elected officials, reduce their expenses to really show that they understand the plight of Nigerians. Thank you very much, Okpeyemi Oke, for your contributions on Rubbin Minds.
Thank you for having me.